Hi, my name's Scott Hamilton. Today's blueprint is about trust, pressure, growth, and what happens when technology companies start up, move fast in a world that increasingly expects resilience, responsibility, and purpose at the same time. My guest today is my good friend Tanishq Jain from Dash, and it's quite a change from some of the recent discussions we've had in the third half, where we've been talking to people late on in their career. And Tanishq is an entrepreneur and founder of a new business, which is very exciting. We'll talk about building services in a crowded fintech market, the reality behind startup culture, whether ESG in tech is genuinely meaningful yet, and what leadership looks like when the pressure never really switches off. Tanishq, hello, how are you other than hot?
Well, thanks for having me, Scott. And yes, rightfully, it's very warm. I think the weather was a bit normal or a bit better, but can't complain. It's 2 weeks of the year where we get the sun and the heat, so can't be the one complaining about it.
Exactly, and as we were saying off air there, we're going to come on and talk about sustainability a lot. So let's not have the discussion about whether we should have air conditioning units in our respective houses or not, because it just doesn't quite fit with the vibe, does it?
Not really. I think it's like a vicious cycle. You have to put more air cons in. The next year you have to put more air cons in, and it's just like a never-ending cycle.
It is
So I
indeed.
would just like keep a hand fan on me rather than having these air con vicious cycle throughout my life.
So, Therese, let's go back to the start. We'll get into the business and, ESG and Dash and the market and everything, but let's take the mic, give us a couple of minutes thumbnail introduction to you and what you're about.
Great. So I'm Tanishq. I'm founder of Dash. I'll keep it brief about what Dash is. In one line, Dash is your AI Chief Sustainability Officer. And what that means is we are here to make sustainability more business friendly and ROI driven. Before the entrepreneurial journey started for me, I think my career was very classic city grad career. Studied finance, studied CFA, started my career in finance at the stock exchange, and never really was amazed by the glitz and glamour of the financial world, but always curious about how money moves and how money make things move, from not a power move, but more of how impactful that thing is. So that's always been the thing that attracted me to finance and money and the economics of the world. And grew up in a small town in India, but in a very small, tight-knit community where I think since we're talking about sustainability, I think it's like I did not have the right words when I was younger. But now that I reflect back on it, I think it was a community which did prioritize a lot of sustainable practices on an everyday basis, without the corporates kind of enabling us to recycle and reuse and restitch our torn clothes. I think it came from more from the community and the cultural level, which I think I'm so grateful for at this day and age where we're talking about resource scarcity throughout the world and being just more mindful about how I consume. So that's in a nutshell about me and my past.
Very, very good. And listen, I'm going to throw you in here because we've known each other for a couple of years and we've talked about this a lot. And one thing is that, let's be clear, on being an entrepreneur is a bit in the blood, isn't it? And actually, sustainability and recycling's in the blood a little bit. So why don't you tell our audience what your dad does and some of your kind of like family history here as well? Because I love this and I think this is really fascinating stuff.
It is truly fascinating, actually. I think, as I said, like when you're growing up in a in a circle and an environment, you don't really realize how different it is from the outside world. And I grew up, so my family business has always been into commodities recycling. So we buy ships which are decommissioned and we recycle them and sell them in the local market. So it's a way of bringing metal and commodities back into the production and the manufacturing businesses. Growing up, I didn't really realize how cool that business is. Apart from what the impact it's making, I didn't really realize how cool it is. Like getting to go on the ship, and just going through the engine rooms, going through the captain's room. And now that I say that to my friends, sometimes they're like, What do you mean you went to an engine? What do you mean like you went to the captain's room and you can see all the maps of how a ship navigates through oil, like how they're carrying the oil, how they're carrying everything. So it's I think, as I said, like I did not have the right words back then as a younger child, which I've seen that change now. I think I can see like my little nieces and nephews now knowing the word sustainability from a very young age, which is I think which is a great way to move ahead for the next generation. And so yeah, I think sustainability and recycling has always been in my blood somehow, and I think entrepreneurship as well, because I've seen my not only my dad but my grandma being an entrepreneur. She was a creative mind and creative soul, and just making stuff at home in her house and putting up an exhibit every year, and just having that entrepreneurship drive, not with the aim of owning things or not with the aim of being up in the hierarchy, but rather than being closer to making an impact, um, being closer to have your own independence about your own decisions and being more accountable for your own decisions. I think that's a big part of entrepreneurship. So yeah, I think in a way these things have been in my blood.
I love that, and this is why I love doing these. I don't call them interviews; I call them conversations, because as much as I've known you for 2 years, over 2 years now, I have learned something new in the first 5 minutes of this conversation. So, just thinking, we every time we skip back a generation every time we talk. So my grandmother did this, and my great grandmother did this. I feel as if I'll be going back 1,000 years before we know it. But I do think this is important about sustainability. And I can't remember you gave me a figure once of how much of a ship can be recycled, the metal of a ship, and it was. I'm going to say it was north of 70-80% or something like that. Correct me here, but it was such a phenomenal number. And then I think back to talking to Andy Gummershaw way back on the first conversation we had in the third half, and he said the circular economy recycling in the UK runs at 7% in total across everything. It's ridiculously low. Andy works in e-waste recycling. So there is such a huge upside thinking about what your dad does with ships and metal, yeah?
It is. I think uh, I circular economy is so important moving forward. I think especially given the geopolitical situations that we all the countries are facing. I think it's just a way of bringing back resources into consumption again. So for example, with ships or with anything like, if you are manufacturing it intentfully with an intent that once it reaches its end of life, I want to have a scrap value of it. And not, especially when we're talking to businesses, it's very important to keep like business intentions in one hand and your values in another. And you need to kind of work with both of them up. So when we talk about like an industry like shipping, I realize the reason why those ships are coming for scrap and for dismantling is because when they were built, the price of production is so high. People try to make sure that even towards the dying breath of the ship, they are able to, as a ship owners, able to make as much money out of it as possible.
Mm.
And talking about businesses and sustainability on a personal level is slightly different than sustainability as a business or as a corporate. And I see like more businesses being mindful of, okay, we see sustainability more as something to increase our returns. We see sustainability more in a way that kind of de-risks our business in long term. And that's really fascinating to see. And I think the laws and regulations, especially around Europe, are so much helpful. I do see a lot of memes coming up on LinkedIn and Instagram about European sustainability laws and other countries' sustainability laws. And there's this one meme about three dragon heads and European sustainability law being the cap of the bottle attached to the rest of the plastic bottle. It's such a small law, but it's so powerful, which says that
Mm.
sustainability doesn't have to be a big hoo-ha of, oh, I'm being sustainable or I'm recycling. It's just a small but powerful actions that everyone needs to take.
Yeah. And listen, we'll come on and talk about this more, and I know we have talked about this in the past a number of times, and you make the point here that this isn't just it's a nice to do and a tick box exercise for some people and stay out of jail for some people. The economics of this are really important. That there's money here in recycling, either in terms of savings, operational savings, or generating income. So yeah, I think it's a really important story there. So listen, where did I think you've kind of in part answered this, but where did the original idea for Dash itself come from? And what was the problem that was frustrating you enough to kind of leave the life of corporate, even though you'd only been in it for about 6 months, and decide to go and build something?
I wouldn't lie. I think the life of corporate is indeed very cushy, and I do miss it from time to time when I'm having my dull days. I think, but the idea of Dash really began when, as I said, it was a huge fintech business that I was working in, which I did not know at the time when I was joining the business. So when I was joining the stock exchange, from the outside of it, it just seems that it's just like stock exchange as a business. But when I got into that ecosystem, I realized how massive that ecosystem is and how it impacts us in so many ways we don't even think about. So for example, they own exchanges not only in the UK but overseas as well. They owned a lot of tech businesses, a lot of fintech businesses. But the crux of everything was money was being moved based on the data they have, and they're able to present the data to the people who are moving the money, which was they were being a catalyst and they were being the market makers in a lot of ways. And that's where I remember once we were looking at the sustainability funds in the US, and we were trying to do we were implementing a methodology to kind of rate those funds on the sustainability criteria, which was very interesting because when I started delving into that activity, a fund's obviously made up of a basket of businesses, but we did not have enough information of sustainability on individual businesses, but we were still trying to rate a fund on sustainability. So it was kind of a error 404 for me in my mind, because I'm like, if you do not know what the what the sustainability characteristics of the composition is, how can we try to do it from a top bottom approach? Shouldn't it be like more of a bottom top approach? Because with the top to bottom approach, there are a lot of assumptions that come into place, and there are a lot of layers of information that are unverified, and and that was really, I think, frustrating to a certain extent, but also insightful. That it was good to see my colleagues had acknowledged the same issue, and that's what they were working towards. But given the size of the business that they were operating within, making change is not bringing change to the on ground is not as quick as they would like to either. And that was where I found, I think, my kind of brain go click. And it didn't start off like doing that. I want to do something of my own outside of the business, because the LSEC itself is a very entrepreneurial company. They have a separate team for entrepreneurs within the business, where if you have an idea for a product or a business, you can go and pitch it to them and they can drive it for you and with you. And so I started off with that idea that, I'll probably kind of structure this idea of how we can remove the roadblocks of sustainability data from a ground, like on root level, and which would allow more money to flow into the businesses and industries which actually need it. Rather than just allotting a lot more money to big techs for building AI data centers, maybe prioritizing companies to build more recycling businesses and more circular economy is what indeed we might need. So that's how it started on. And after a bit, I think it was 6 months into my research and my conversations that I was having within the company and outside, I was like, this is the age and time. Fortunately, I can take this risk, because entrepreneurship is indeed a big risk. So like, I want to drive this at a speed that I can manage and I can bring change quicker. And that's when I decided in 2023 that this is the time for me to, just take this big leap, and just see how this idea would take shape of its own. And here we are in 2026.
In 2026. So that's interesting. And I reflect on this a lot about, I don't think you're probably unique here, that, entrepreneurs in large organizations, people with great ideas, and this is not any disingenuous comment towards the stock exchange, because I've worked around tech companies and banks for 30 years here. where everybody's got a desire to do something, but process and bureaucracy and governance, just by its very nature of the institutions that you're sitting in, I'm not. People say it stifles it. I'm not so sure it stifles it. I think it encourages it, but it can just slow it down and grind it down a little bit. Whereas I think what you're saying is like having worked your research project, the minute you step out, you feel free of those shackles, albeit, and we'll come on and talk about this with no money, where you have to go and start doing things and make it real. Was that the moment where you just thought, listen, I can't sit here dreaming the dream anymore. I now need to just go out and do something.
I think it was. I mean, one part of me, as you rightfully said, was, well, wanting to do one thing is different, but when you start putting down the numbers for it, especially as a tech founder, you're like, ooh, like I need like a good amount of runway personally and for the business as well. But I think it was more than the element of, I know like the slowing of speed sometimes can stifle innovation coming from like these big corporates and like people who work within these big corporates. But I think it's for the right reasons sometimes, especially when we're seeing, like, I personally feel like when I'm seeing every big company growing at a rate where people on the ground are not growing at the same rate, like the amount of growth or at a big tech versus an amount of growth on an individual level has not been the same for the last couple of years. And I wonder that, maybe that slower speed is sometimes okay, not only on a personal level, but also on a corporate level, that it needs to be more mindful and it needs to be more well thought. That is this idea, especially if it's a business idea, how impactful it is going to be, not only for myself, but in the industry I'm working in.
Mm.
For example, for me, I think since I was trying to get into the sustainability tech field, I really wanted to, it's a very crowded space. We all know that. So I really wanted to make sure that I want to feel that, oh, it's a unique idea and I want to bring change, but I also need to make sure that I'm doing my research inclusive of all the people and the businesses that have not worked out as well. And I think despite of all those stats, I think it was like, you know what, I still just need to try it out. I think that's a bit different thing about like an entrepreneur, where you just like, they have this bug in their mind. They're like, I just need to try it out myself. If it doesn't work out, I just have to like just put my head down and accept it. But I'd rather accept it by doing it my, like Frank Sinatra's song, I did it my way. I think that's literally the anthem of my life. Uh, and that's how I decided to, like, it's time to like do this now.
You've opened up the can of worms here, because in true third half style, you're going to have to sing a rendition of "My Way" at the end of this podcast. So now for anybody who's listened to this and not watching on YouTube, Tanishq now looks really nervous. So listen, kind of final question on Dash, and then we'll circle back to it. But what have you learned about customers? And again, this is kind of stepping out from large corporate to startup. And we'll come on and talk about the market, and we'll come on and talk about sustainability more. But just that your engagement with customers, what surprised you, and what do people misunderstand about this business?
Oh, very good question. I think especially the last part about what do people misunderstand about this industry. That's a long list. But I think there's been a very drastic shift in the buyer's mindset in my industry since 2023 versus 2026. I think 2023, we still had the shocks of COVID hitting us in the economy and the business, but we did not have the mega shocks of the wars and the administration change, etc. So people were fairly bit more optimistic, and they were fairly more open to hearing there are different, there's another way of kind of growing their business in a more safer manner and a more de-riskier manner. But I think 2024-ish is when things really shifted for me and the way I was interacting with the market, because people just wanted to have a very clear cut value proposition, because they did not, no one was ready to buy a SaaS product just because it's a SaaS product. I know in the past, as a traditional manufacturing business, people would be fascinated to buy a cool tech product because they can boast it to their friends that, oh, we are doing this with this product, even though they might not be making the most of it. But they really liked having those things and tools in the toolkit. But post 2024, 2025 especially, people were just wanting to buy things only if they are fed with the spoon that, okay, this is how you use it, and this is exactly what the value you're going to get, which as an early stage startup is very hard for us to do, because as much as we want to give that instant value to a business in the volume that we want, we can't really do that until we have businesses give us their insights and be open to engaging with us in a more collaborative manner. And that took me some time to kind of understand that shift. And
Yeah.
2025, especially, I remember we had a chat in 2025 beginning about when the administration in the US changed. And remember us having a chat about how you feel about it. And I think honestly, 2025 first quarter was extremely personally very stressful, because not only was I trying to make sales to the customers, but also as an entrepreneur, it was more of a very deep self-reflection moment for me as to, am I in the right industry? Is this industry ready for moving forward? Is my business ready to be in part of the industry? So there's a lot of existential questions that were happening. And I realized as an entrepreneur, that's just become now my part of growth. I
Mm.
can't really hope to not have those existential questions on a more regular basis. But what I need to then learn is that kind of barricade them and like just contain them within a self-reflection moment. And rather than taking a decision out of it or based on it, I just use it as a more of a brainstorming session for myself with myself.
Yeah.
And that's what's changed, I think, in the past few years as an entrepreneur for me in this industry.
That's really interesting, and I've seen a lot of that change firsthand, and I think I think you're an incredibly honest and transparent person, which is great, and just to reflect on that, and I think it comes through the business very strongly as well. See if we talk about the market, right? And I suspect strongly fintech is hugely crowded. Just let's stick with fintech more broadly at the moment. Does it feel oversaturated to you? And what truly differentiates some? You look across a lot of peers. You work in some of the startup communities. How are you reflecting across that kind of broader spectrum? Beyond certainly Dash and maybe even beyond ESG and sustainability.
Uh, Good question about, I think, the kind of defining or understanding the market differentiation in a crowded space. You use the example of fintech. I think I know we are not in fintech, but I do observe fintech as a space, and I see a lot of businesses enter it because it's become more of a volume industry where if you're able to create that volume of transactions, your rate of return on your business or your investments is much quicker and much higher. I think that's the shape it's taken over the years, and innovation has become sort of a catalyst for like for that volume. And so that equation of how you grow a business in a fintech has taken a very good shape and form over the past few years. We're seeing like to the likes of big digital banks like Revolut and Monzo and Starling in the UK with zero branches across the country, but still having one of the largest portfolio of customers. And I think that that's the same in like sustainability tech space for me and climate tech for me, where it used to feel more crowded, but I would be honest, I think for the past few quarters, I am feeling that crowdedness has kind of shaked it off itself,
Mm,
because a lot of businesses and a lot of tech startups who did not have a clear value proposition, not necessarily have that value proposition on the product yet. Doesn't, I think that takes, I think those are two different things, that you have a vision and your product is delivering that vision just yet. But I think if to begin with, a lot of the startups which did not have the clear vision of what do they want to do with sustainability, I think with this wave of AI and with the wave of, just businesses being in the crunch of not buying anything very easily, a lot of them just shed it off. And a good example of that is we're part of the Google Accelerator, and Google Accelerator used to have like this sustainability mini accelerator within that accelerator, where a lot of these businesses used to come in and interact. And the number of businesses that we have interacted with through that accelerator over the past years has gone bit down, but the quality of startups has increased massively. So now every startup, including ours, I think we have a very clear vision of what we want to do with sustainability. There are tools in our space where they do one thing of your customer journey very well, but then they only focus on that one thing. And for us, where we found our sweet spot is we don't want to focus on only doing one thing very well. But since we're targeting SME suppliers who don't need only one thing, but they need a suite of things, but they also need it cheaper, we want to make sure we give them sort of an virtual sustainability officer, which does everything as of now, at least in a way that meets their quality criteria. And
Mm,
over the period of time, that would allow us to do everything good, either organically or either from the means of acquisitions. So that's kind of the vision that has developed for me. And I think that having clarity of the vision is really what's setting me apart when I'm talking to even investors. Because
mm,
since I have that confidence in my clarity, it might not come across very clearly the first time, but I know myself as an individual now that, okay, I have that clarity. Maybe the messaging or maybe the way it's coming across might not be as clear, but that allows me to take a second shot at it because I know that maybe not if the first iteration, maybe the second one, I'm sure that I'm able to kind of rope in the other person about sustainability. And that's really, I think, what's important in this industry right now.
okay. And it's interesting. You made a point there about the market may have become less crowded, certainly for sustainability tech, climate tech, in the past year. And do you think that's? I'm going to give you. I'm going to chain here, but I suspect that might be a little bit of resilience. So people are kind of a bit like, you must become jaundiced after a while. It might be runway, and people just time out for whatever reason, and then my third R is resources, i.e. funding.
Mm.
So is it somewhere between those three, maybe perm, any or all of the above, that the market has dropped off and therefore it's less crowded than what it was 2 years ago?
Mm, I think in terms of runway, I can see that as a prospective reason because I think, when they used to tell me about market timing is everything, I did not really understand the depth of that statement. But I think over the period of time, I've realized how important market timing is for a startup because it's not about market timing for only being able to capture the customers, but it's also about if you've captured the investors, the investors are not an endless pot of money. They will give you money, but there will be a limit to it as well. And if your market timing is just even slightly off, it's still fine. You can find ways to kind of bridge that. But if it's way off, um, either your business needs to be at a stage where it's making some revenue of its own, or you need to make a very sharp pivot into being able to catch up with the market so you can, convince your investors to give you another kind of tranche of money. Because honestly, I think that was a very big difference for mind shift for me as well, where because I come from a more traditional family business
Mm,
environment where you put in your own capital for the longest time and you have returns instantly because it's a more of a commodity business. So it's very capital heavy, but at the same time, you have sales from pretty much day one. But when you move into tech, obviously you do put in your money, you have your investors' money, but sales is nowhere on, like, not the top three things investors talk about to you, which was very interesting to me. And but that has also shifted this year. When I speak to investors, they don't really still prioritize cash sales, but what they do prioritize is how many people have been ready to try out your product, because that's a prospective revenue for you right there. And how many of those people are still ready to continue using your product moving forward? So I think that change in that shift of even at pre-seed stage, mind you, we are still at pre-seed stage, that shift from investors has already happened, at least in the UK. I'm not sure about the US investors market. I know a lot of my founder friends still go to the US. I had a friend who just came back from 6 months of time in SF, must be an expensive 6 months though, for fundraise. And he still wasn't able to fundraise at all in those 6 months. So, yeah, but in the UK investors, I'm definitely seeing that shift.
interesting. And do you think people are getting a little bit jaundiced as well? And I mean, customers and investors alike, and bearing in everything that's going on at a kind of macro level. And I mean jaundiced about everybody wants to be a disruptor.
Mm.
I'm a disruptor. And it becomes a bit overused. And when I kind of slightly roll my eyes now when I talk to people, we're disrupting the market. Okay. When actually, what people want is a little bit of stability, resilience, and trust, which don't necessarily fit that comfortably with being a disruptor. It's got that kind of like slightly passive aggressive, sense about it. Do you see that from both customers and investors alike in terms of how they've kind of approached you in the last 2 or 3 years?
Yeah, I think like that disruptor element, I don't know, maybe it's a climate tech or the subsect of climate tech that we are in, because essentially we are a data, like we are trying to be like a data company within a sustainability field. So there's the ways of disruptions are supposed to be very subtle so that customers don't feel like, oh my God, like if I don't have a fancy, like that's the one question I have gotten for the last 3 years from every customer I've spoken to. Do we need fancy, and those are their words, do we need fancy tech to use your tool? And like I don't really know what fancy tech means, because I think till you have internet and a laptop, I think that's all you need. But I think that stability element, yes, definitely, especially this year, because businesses, I think the buyers in general are seeing so much of disruption around their business, when they're allowing any kind of a tool or solution, be it even as simple thing as a consultant, sustainability consultant coming into their business. They're not expecting those people or those solutions to be disruptful, or it's not like a devil wears Prada to meeting room where like, oh no, florals for spring. I think people now are like, we need florals for spring because they are much safer. We know people are going to buy it, and we right now want to do things which we are a bit more certain about, because those are the only things we can take control of, and because the outcomes are, at this point as a business owner, I think the outcomes feel little less out of control for us. So we want to do things which at least we know we can do well, and when there's more time and money and resources to disrupt, we'll disrupt. But as of now, I think none of the businesses that I'm speaking to want to really disrupt. They really want to stabilize their sustainability plans, and they really want to stabilize what those sustainability plans mean for them, rather
Mm.
than being a world's leading water cleaning AI company. They don't care about that. I think what they care about is, if we are having a lot of dirty water, wastewater, we just want to make sure we don't get a bill from the council for dumping wastewater. We are treating the bill, we're not disturbing the water table beneath us, and we're not disrupting the vegetation around us. We just want to make sure that we all calm and poised and just get on with our days.
So I like that, and that kind of coming back right into the kind of really into the sustainability ESG part of this discussion here, which is what you're saying is these are real, paradigm shifts. These are your clients' prospects that you see making fundamental business changes here, as opposed to just procurement tick box exercises. And again, we've talked about this in the past about greenwashing. Is it going away or not? People buying carbon credits. Like that market, I always find a bit strange. But now we're seeing it kind of getting embedded into real business decision making beyond the procurement language. And what Dash does is help people measure that effectively and build programs to monitor outcomes moving forward.
Definitely. I think it has gone beyond that element of just like a procurement tick box. I think there are multiple reasons for that. One of them primarily being how the laws have now been structured and how the standards have been structured. I think since the standards and the laws kind of put the bigger fishes in any industry liable for how the suppliers are behaving. I think that's really been the paradigm shift for everything. And that's where companies they're still being creative about how they're sustainable, because there's so many ways of being sustainable. I think I truly feel like sustainability is a very unique definition for every business. Like no two businesses can have the same plans of sustainability ever, because their composition of their suppliers are different, their locations are different, their industries are different, the way they operate and the customers are different. So I definitely think I think it's gone beyond that, like just a tick box exercise.
So I'm going to challenge you a little bit here on you and your business. Don't look nervous.
I'm sweating already.
And I tell you what it is, and I think I've kind of raised this with you before, but how do you prioritize sustainability yourself while you're trying to, survive and scale? And I'm going to take you back to you've talked about two things here, like you've talked about many things. Thank you. But when you mentioned Google, right? And then you mention AI, and you're very transparent about these things. And there's a lot of negative press at the moment about Google, not just Google, I mean, all the hyperscalers and building data centers that, and building AI that sucks up a huge amount of water and resources. How do you circle that particular square from a Dash and a Tanishq perspective?
It's a very good question about like how sustainability and AI kind of go hand in hand, because some might say it is an oxymoron, that we are trying to solve the sustainability problem with AI. I think to begin with, how I started kind of perimetering my impact or like my business's impact is simply by making sure that we are not using AI just blindly. I think even for me to change my messaging with my customers and investors about, oh, we are an AI chief sustainability officer or we are an AI sustainability partner, I had to be very mindful of where and when am I doing that, because I don't want to just plugging in AI is not the hardest thing, especially in this day and age. I can use like AI for every internal workflow that I have. I can plug in AI into every step that the user is doing. But I think I did not want to do that because one, as a business, I think it's an uncontrollable way of growing your product. You need to really know what exactly are you building. Are you building a basket of different AI agents simply, or are you building what they call a wrapper, or are you building like an actual value proposition which is kind of accelerated with AI. And that's, I think we kind of sit in the middle of both of them. The first thing we do is we set a limit of our monthly billing with Google, because it is very easy to get into the whole lure of just using AI for coding, using AI for just chatting with it every day and just getting questions, etc. But we set a spend limit every month, and we ensure that we kind of mark that limit against our revenues and our user consumption. So it doesn't happen that we're spending more resources to get more resources. That should never be the case, at least in the when we're talking about AI. And I do acknowledge, the bad press around AI and the data centers, and I think it is equally very troubling for me in a sense that how do I justify that to myself, and how do I justify that to my investors, that how am I for solving the sustainability thing when I'm also talking about AI. But one clear thing I think I've always had with Dash is we are approaching sustainability from a very business perspective. We can either completely kind of shun away AI or using AI in our business, which if we can, great. But we also need to think about if our customers would be able to use our value proposition as well as we want them to. And I think how we see AI fit into our whole ecosystem is we're making our value proposition more accessible via AI. So we are not necessarily building a new model. We are not necessarily building different models of the existing models. What we are simply doing is we are collecting the data, that sustainability data that industries and the businesses need, and using AI to gather that data and using AI to process and analyze that data. But beyond that, when it comes to, for example, planning, or when it comes to implementing an action plan, we still want it to be grounded in actual data rather than AI hallucinating things, because that's hard for us to control as well.
Yeah, good answer. But and also and it's the right answer. I mean, my point of view on these things, and it's why I do the third half and the tech ledger before. These things are here and now. I think that we have to have. Rashik Palmer talks a lot about responsible computing. AI is here to stay. How do we use it? How do we use the advancement of technology? But be very conscious about some of the downsides or the challenges therein as well. So it's kind of all about the balance and the offset.
Mhm.
Listen, we've got a few minutes left. Let's talk about you a little bit more again, and your journey. And I'm kind of fascinated about this and your perspective on what do you think younger founders misunderstand about leadership? Because we do have this sense, and I know it's changing, but we still have this sense of people with 20 years experience under their belt. They're good, strong leaders, but there's a lot of very, very good young entrepreneurial leaders out there as well. But what do young founders misunderstand about this?
Mm, I think years of experience does obviously help a lot as a leader, where I think what those years present to you is insights into very different kinds of people, which as a young leader, I'm yet to come across. So I do value those years of experience that a lot of leaders have. Like, for example, you've been in, like, you've been working for decades now. I think the experience you would have would be different than mine. And both of our experiences are still valuable. But what I see, like with young entrepreneurs at the moment, that maybe they misunderstand is a bit about what entrepreneurship is about, because honestly, like even now at this point for Dash, we are like three people in a business who interact on a day-to-day basis, right? Like we have you as a great advisor, and we have Alan, and we have like more people around us, but on a day-to-day basis, it's at the end of the day only three people in the office. And there's not much hierarchy that we can really build. And I think that's something, I think that getting out of that mindset of leadership is about leading the hierarchy, or drawing the hierarchy, or drawing those um, just like having being on the top of the chain or whatever. I think more than that, how I really see leadership is having I think the guts to say that, hey, I might not know everything, and I want to know everything, but I'm ready to kind of drive the conversation about what does everyone know and not know. So kind of opening up the platform and opening up the sort of a circle for conversation for your team about being everyone feels comfortable to be honest about, hey, I don't know how to do this, or I actually don't, I do know how to do this better than you, or I can help you do it. I think really opening up the grounds for how many people are there in your team to be honest about their skills and being honest about their curiosities is what I feel young entrepreneurs really benefit from. I see it in my team. Like I think my engineer and I think we are quite honest about what each of us can do and cannot do. And I throw him a lot of problems which he has not dealt with before, and I keep checking with him that I know I'm giving you this problem to solve tech wise. I know you probably haven't looked into it before, but are you happy to? Does it align with where you want to grow, or does it align with what you want to kind of explore? And I think just asking that question, I've seen just opens a different path of thinking where the person still does that thing that you want them to do, but does it with more intent and does it with more curiosity, rather than just like, asked me to do it, so I have to do it. But it's rather that they approach it more from a way that, oh, that if I find something along the way, the leader does want to hear my thoughts on it, and it's just not a one way
Hmm.
over here. I think that's something I think young entrepreneurs like me, or at least me, I think I really benefit from that as a leader.
Hmm. Interesting. And how do you? I mean, again, working in that very kind of small team, you as the lead man, your idea, your pet project, you're the guy putting more skin in the game than anybody else, and therefore you must kind of get sucked into almost 24/7 work at times. Now, a couple of things related to that. How do you manage expectations of the team accordingly? Because that's a tough one, I'd imagine, when you're kind of always on. And the second part of it is, do you switch off? And what do you do to switch off? Run around in the blazing heat at the moment.
I think I think managing the expectations part is really the most challenging part, to be honest, for me as a pre-seed founder, because as much as I'm putting the skin in the game and as much, the risks I'm taking, I think at the end of the day, it's been my decision as a founder to find this company and find this business and drive this business. But when I'm having people come on board and when I'm having people join my team, as an engineer, as a consultant or whatever that capacity is, I really need to kind of understand the expectations from the get-go because everyone does like we are social beings. I think when we interact with each other, we have certain level of expectations, and I don't think that's really wrong to have. Those expectations need to be not like they not always need to be materialistic, but it could be as simple as having the feeling of being heard from the people you are in a team with. And I think that understanding and that constant kind of um, wearing that hat of always making sure that I'm interacting with them as a team member, but also as a human, is I think interestingly, that's a very good challenge to have as a startup founder to keep your team on because terms of what we can offer to them at this stage is very much limited against the skill sets that they bring on the team. So acknowledging that there's a misbalance of what they're putting in and what they're getting out right now versus they might get it in like 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, whatever. And I know we have a running joke of how am I a millionaire yet? I'm a billionaire yet. But I think acknowledging that like there's not that balance yet, I think is very important, and I think it's very hard for me to do as well. It used to be harder for me to do initially, but then I'm like, you know what? Now that I've signed up already to do it, you can't really back out of it, can you? So I might as well acknowledge that there's a misbalance of how much time and skills you're putting in versus what you're getting now. I think that playfulness is really helpful to deal with the team. Um, and to your second question about does my mind ever turn off? I think yes and no. I think I've learned over the period of time that rest is equally or not rest really. I think moving away or stepping away from whatever you're focusing on is very important for what you're doing as well, because it just gives you a different perspective to the same things that you're looking at. And that's very important as a founder. So for me, I think when I started off, I used to not have a proper schedule of what my working day looks like. I think, but within the first month, I realized I don't really like that. I don't really like not having a structure to my day and not having a structure to my week and my year and my months. And I'm like, it's just not sustainable for me to operate in that way. I know there are a lot of talks about digital nomads. I can live in Spain, I can live in Bali and do my business from there, sitting on the beach. Da, 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 da. I just don't think I'm that kind of a founder who can sit by the beach in Bali and take my calls and do my meetings and do my work.
Well, you can't sit on the beach in Bali and work because you've just been complaining about how hot it is in London at the moment. So
That's
it's
the other reason.
I can see you sitting there with a pina colada on the beach, just thinking, "Oh my goodness, it's too hot here."
I need like two fans in Bali. If I need two fans in London, I can only imagine how many fans I need in Bali on me to keep me cool. And both my hands with like pina coladas and coconut water. There's no cheap laptop or my phone on me, so I'll just be like chilling by the beach.
I refer you to my previous comment. It's not a good look for somebody in sustainability to be surrounded by fans on a beach.
Second, I don't know how those fans would work because there's no electricity outlets on the beaches. So, and I don't want to risk getting an electric shock on the beach just because of the fan. I'd
A
rather
bit,
take my hand fan with me.
a big oil generator there. So listen, let's finish with some quick fire questions, Tanishq. This has been brilliant. Okay, let's go. If you banned one piece of startup jargon tomorrow, what would it be?
From 0 to 1.
Oh, I love that. From 0 to 1. Yeah. Okay. What's the most ridiculous bit of advice as a founder you've ever heard?
Uh, that I can just go to SF for 3 months and raise millions of pounds of money and just come back and run my business.
Did somebody actually tell you that?
I get that every other week actually.
Just jump the plane to the west coast and everything will be all right.
Just hang out, go and just have pizzas every day, live in like a hostel and raise money. I'm like, yeah, sure.
Yeah, yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'll pass. What's your most founder habit? What's the habit you've got that most is like, hey, that's a founder habit?
I think breaking down a well-working solution or well-working idea and almost to the bits where the other founder is about to cry, but not with an intention to making them cry or quit the business. But I think kind of being the devil's advocate at any given point of time, I have to really make sure that I'm not a devil's advocate in every conversation with my friends as well. But I think that being a devil's advocate is just something that I've picked up, and I just have to. But I think
You must be a nightmare to your friends. I can imagine like you having a debate about which movie you're going to go and talk to and going to go and see on a Saturday night. And you picking, oh no, we can't go and see that one because you've developed this founder habit of picking everything.
it's quite the opposite. My friends think that I'm not very founder-like because I'm very easy to go with, and I'm not very like foundry, like, staying up at like till 3 a.m., using my founder jargons and all of those things. So my closest friends, I think, always tell to me, they're like, are you sure you're a founder? You seem like you don't want to, you just, whenever we talk to you, you're just so chilled out. You're taking like a Wednesday on a Wednesday when we speak to you, you're like, oh, I don't want to work today. And you're like, that's not how founders grow. And in my mind, I'm like, oh, I was actually working Saturday, Sunday, Monday, all those days. But yeah, sure, I guess.
But maybe that's it. Maybe when you switch off, you literally switch off. You're like, don't ask me to make any decisions. Just tell me where I'm going and what I'm doing and where to be and when.
Sometimes like I just don't want I just want you to take decisions for me. That's what I'm calling out to the other friend. I don't want any speech today.
Yeah. Okay. Coffee, chaos, or spreadsheets? What powers the business?
Ooh, definitely chaos. Yeah.
Organized chaos with a little bit of coffee and a few spreadsheets. Okay. This is a kind of slightly melancholic thing. If Dash disappeared tomorrow, what would you do?
Ooh, I actually get that question quite a lot when I'm speaking to investors. So it's not a melancholic thing now. Investors love to ask me that. I think if it wasn't for Dash, I would probably be doing something in recycling. I don't think I would want to be in the operation side of it, but I would really like to create a portfolio of recycling or renewable energy businesses, and just like structure it as a financial instrument over the period of time. I think my love for finance and sustainability would intersect then again.
No, I love that because and that just reflects you and your value system, doesn't it? Dash is the vehicle, Dash is the mission, and I know how committed you are to it. But underneath all that, it's sustainability and finance that drives you. And my closing question, you kind of touched on there, and it's back to Dash, and I don't want you to take a 20-minute sales pitch in this. But what do you want Dash to stand for beyond just growth?
It's the reason why I named it Dash was when we teach kids about filling in a sentence, we usually leave a blank space and we ask the kid that, hey, my name is Dash. And the reason why I named it Dash was I wanted companies and businesses to be able to define sustainability for themselves. And I think that's really what I see Dash being in the coming years, where they are able to define how they de-risk their business and how they kind of future-proof their business while also driving growth. And sustainability is just one of those factors. I'm not saying it's the angelical father from heaven driving the growth for the business, but it is definitely one of the gospels which can drive growth for your business. And that's what I really believe Dash would be in the few coming years, that it becomes one of the important tools to make you understand how sustainability is important for your business, and how important your business is for sustainability. So I think that's what I really want Dash to be.
Wow, I love that. That we almost became spiritual there, didn't we?
You know,
It's
let's become a cult leader now.
It's not the God from heaven, but it's one of the it's one of the Gospitals, ladies and
I'm not
gentlemen.
being Christian. I don't know why I took up that reference. I'm like, am I doing the structures right? I don't know what's the hierarchy of heavenly figures there.
You had a moment. You need to go and lie down. I've never heard you talking spiritually in 2 years, but I love it. You know, it's not godlike. It's just a
Go to the
Gospel.
church. That's what I need to do. I need to go to the church.
Now that's your mum talking.
She's actually telling me that.
Tanishq, listen, thank you so much for joining us in the third half. I tell you what I've really loved about this is that we've talked, I mean, about the obvious stuff, technology, growth, sustainability, but we've really dug into some of the human side underneath it all, which is what the third half is all about. The people aspect of people, planet, and progress, and we've touched on the pressure you see, your responsibility, culture, and what success actually means to you. And I think that's so important as you take the business forward. And well done. I've got huge respect for you and what you're doing and how you're going about it. So thank you so much for joining us in the third half. I will let you get on with the rest of your day now.
No, thanks so much for having me. I think everyone needs to. I think everyone's who's hearing. I think one thing I appreciate is Scott was the first believer in Dash, and I think that I think you and your optimism really helped me kickstart Dash, and I think I'll always be grateful for that. And I'm really grateful that I could speak on the third half today, and to all the speakers and all the listeners out there. So thanks for having me.
Perfect. Thanks. Cheers, Tanishq.
The stillness in the car. The lock and the key opens into something. Another time.